Chapter 21 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ahmed Yama Muhammad, 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall, Coming Profession for Boys. In order that as little as possible may seem to be taken for granted or as mere expressions of the opinions of the author, we cite the views of specialists as to the possibilities of this field, so new in this country, of intensive agriculture. This will show that the conviction has become general that, as workers, as teachers, and as discoverers, there is no career more inviting or more lucrative or more dignified than that of the skillful foster father of plants. Children brought up in city tenements tend to become vicious and sickly, but if transported to country homes, they may grow up strong and self-respected men and women. There are hundreds of applicants for every position in the cities, and competition forces the pay down to the lowest level. Living expenses are heavier. The risk to health from sedentary occupations, long hours in ill-ventilated offices, stores, and workshops is serious. There are few inducements to outdoor exercise. Even if he lives at home, the boy who's forced to the street or into the factory before he has the strength or education to do good work remains an unskilled worker all his life. Manufacturing is upon a larger and larger scale. The division of labor is greater and greater. Not only does the gulf between capitalist and laborer widen, but with it the gulf between skilled and unskilled labor. What shall our boys do for a living? Charles F. Wingate. It is the city that breeds or attracts most of the pauperism and crime. The country has its own healthy life. Everyone is born with some natural gift, and it is a good thing to discover early in life what one's natural gifts are, so that each may be educated in the direction suited to natural capacity. How are you to treat a lad who has naturally an inclination for the work on the farm? In the first place, do not provide him with any spending money unless he earns it. The prime thing necessary is to give the boy a personal interest in what is going on upon the farm. Give him a plot of land as his home. Let him understand that anything he may grow upon this land shall belong to him. But do not give him this plot and say, "There, take it, do as you like with it." He will wonder what to do with it. He will need somebody to help him by teaching him what he is to do. Enter into a partnership with him at the start. Give him some instruction as to what it is best for him to do with his plot. Find out his inclination. Give him sympathy and help. Bring out his natural appetite for farming life. Teach him method in his work. Teach him to think his way out. And best of all, teach him to work for definite results. This is what is wanted in any line of life, especially in farm life. Let the work of the boy have a meaning and a purpose. Let him understand that certain results cannot be accomplished in any other way, and give him chances to go outside and see what other people are doing. Let him see good scientific agriculture and be encouraged to pursue such methods. Provide for him the very best reading that can be found in agricultural journals and books. Let him have 3 or 4 years at an agricultural college. All the influencers there point to agriculture as the best calling for a young man who is fit for it, whereas in other colleges the influences are all in the opposite directions. At our agricultural college, a youth has all the necessary advantages of general education, and also an education in the lines fitting him especially for the calling he has selected. United States Department of Agriculture, Bulletin 138, contents. Among farmers and gardeners, not enough thought is given to the whys and wherefores, or cause and effect. As a rule, they go on year after year, without profiting by the personal opportunity afforded them of observation, or by the results of experiments at scientific stations. With rare exceptions, the young farmer and gardener takes up his work not from the scientific side, but strictly from the labor side, and he begins at the bottom, meeting the same difficulties as did his father, and too often not acquiring information beyond what his father possessed. This should not be. Agriculture should be taught in all our public schools in country districts, as it has been taught for years in Germany and Austria. It should be elevated as an art. In its higher state, it is already an art. No pursuit possesses a greater scope for development. The field is almost unoccupied by leaders, scientific and practical. Bernard Landrich in 999 Queries and Answers. In accordance with these ideas, the Baron de Hirsch Agricultural School at Woodbine, New Jersey, is giving practical courses in agriculture to Jewish boys on the principle of individual plots, all free where necessary. The trustees of the State Agricultural College of New Jersey at New Brunswick has established winter courses in agriculture, open to all residents of New Jersey over 16 years of age. Courses will be for 12 weeks and only a small interest fee is required. Few books will be needed. Other states are doing likewise. All will need many teachers and experimenters. At present, all who know anything about intensive agriculture are snapped up by the numerous government experiment stations at good salaries. The land like that of the Rockefellers, the Payneys, the cuttings on which farming is carried on by unnecessarily expensive methods, needs the service of trained agriculturists and professional foresters. The Division of Forestry at the start employed 11 persons, but now it has in the field as many hundreds of employees, including a lot of trained foresters. The railroads also see the profit in teaching farming and are devoting more and more money to experiments and lectures to show the farmers that they can get more and better crop with the same effort by the intelligent selection of seeds. The Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railway Company ran its first seed and soil special over the entire system in the winter of 904 and 905 and has lectured to hundreds of thousands of farmers since. They report to us that there is no doubt that the lectures did a great deal of good, and necessarily the larger increase of crops which followed is due to the scientific methods of farming expounded by the various professors. The late President James J. Hill wrote much about the small farms' large yields. The hundreds of thousands of war gardens, unskillfully conducted and glutting the local market with crops all matured at about the same local time, will unreasonably digest money with intensive cultivation, especially those who work but do not think. The remedy is more instruction. The effect that agricultural colleges and experiment stations is plain to the eye in the better appearances for farms as we near the centers of instructions. Some years ago, a clergyman published a book upon the Adirondacks. It was full of poetry, and he sent men up there who afterwards became known as Murray's Fools. They knew nothing about the life and had no suitability and little preparation for it. We do not wish to bring out a crop of 3 acres and Liberty Fools. We are telling what has been done and what can be done again. It does not follow that every man can or will do it, much less teach it or advance the art. But the field is a large one, and holds our great promise to those who persevere and excel in it. If anyone thinks that the profit of the earth will come to the cultivator without very intelligent and steady work, he is mistaken. No owner of land, unless others require it to live upon, can make money by neglecting it. Says Maxwell's talisman, the greatest good that can be done to the American farmer today is to teach him to make the greatest possible profit from the smallest tract of land from which a family can be supported in comfort. A great influence operating today against keeping the boys in the country is that the boy does not have money enough to buy a farm. It is unfortunately true that in some places there is a trend in the direction of absorbing farms into still larger farms with a consequent diminution of population. As in Iowa and other sections, the remedy for this is to demonstrate that if the value is in the boy rather than in the farm, and the boy is taught intensive, diversified scientific farming, a good living with a surplus profit that will provide amply for old age may be made from a comparatively small tract of land. The tract may be, say, 10 acres, with ample cultivation, irrigation, and fertilization, or even without irrigation, because a hoe and a cultivator in the hands of a scientific farmer may bring as good and better results in providing moisture for growing plants as can be had from a ditch and unlimited water in the hands of an ignorant farmer. The field of discovery is always limitless, and it is to those boys or girls who devote their attention to this with the greatest return will come. What a fine thing it would be to find even one plant free from rust in the midst of a rusted field. It would be a rust-resistant plant. Its offspring would probably be also rust-resistant. If you should ever find such a plant, be sure to save its seed and plant in a plot by itself. The next year again save seed from those plants least rusted. Possibly you can develop a rust-proof race of wheat. Keep your eyes open. Agriculture for Beginners by Burkett, Stevens, and Hill, page 76 from 78. So you may pluck gain out of loss. If you want to do experiments, the influence of either on plants is one new and wonderful field. It seems to induce artificial rest, so that lilacs, for instance, can be made to bloom twice by a treatment, the last time near Christmas. E.V. Wilcox says in Farming that in 1899 a small quantity of durum or macaroni wheat was introduced into this country for trial. It was unprofitable in localities where there was too little rain for ordinary wheat. 6 years later, 20 million bushels per year of the wheat was grown in the United States. Its production has increased greatly every season and has added materially to the total of the wheat crop. Through fall cultivation has been formed to increase the yield, and in some parts of the wheat belt, 1 in 5 of the farmers has already adopted the practice. In certain states where manuring has been thought unnecessary, experiments have demonstrated that the yield may be increased 60% by this simple practice. The wheat production of Nebraska was increased more than 10 million bushels by the introduction of a hardy strain of Turkey red wheat. Swedish select oats in Wisconsin have greatly augmented the oat yield of the state. In 1899, 6 pounds of the seed was brought to the state, and from this a small beginning of crop of 9 million bushels was harvested 5 years later. Mr. Gideon of Minnesota planted many apple seeds, and from them all raised one tree that was very fruitful, finely flavored, and able to withstand the cold Minnesota weather. This tree he multiplied by grafts and named it the wilted apple. It is said that in this one apple he benefited the world to the value of more than $1 million. You must not let any valuable bud or seed variant be lost. Agriculture for Beginners, page 61. The fact ought to be very helpful to us next year when planting corn. We should plant seed secured only from stocks that produce the most corn. If we follow this plan year by year, each acre of land will be made to produce more kernels and hence a large crop of corn, and yet no more expense will be required to raise the crop. Same, page 71. The Wolf's Clock tells how the country got a new industry. Mr. George Gibbs of Clearbrook Wash has made his stake by growing tulips and hyacinth bulbs. He had a little place on Orcas Island in Puget Sound He did not know anything about growing flowers, but he did know that certain varieties of bulbs brought good prices in the East. He was observant enough to see that the moist, warm climate and rich soil of the Puget Sound country were peculiarly favorable to flowers. He had bad luck with his bulbs. That only meant that he still had something to learn. He kept his nerve even when he went bankrupt. His friend told him he was wasting time, but they should not shake his faith. In 12 years he found that he was right. His wonderful gardens were making him rich. Other men have gone into the business, but he was first and has kept his lead. He has made the Puget Sound country the greatest rival of Holland in the sale of flowering bulbs. Quantities of wild herbs, fruits, and roots that no one eats are good. The juices has had a list of over 200 kinds of that the Indians ate, but it was lost. Someone can do a great service by making it up again by research and experiment. Thousands more of the wild things must be good for dyes, fabrics, and fodder. Fame like Burbanks and fortune awaits the one who's good self-advertiser and can find the use of the poetic daisies, goldenrod, and thistle, the all-pervading pusley, and such other vegetable vermin. An interesting experiment is conducted in growing tea with colored child labor at T, South Carolina, by the aid of education and machinery and the cooperation of the Agricultural Department at Washington, who will furnish particulars. Whatever may be its outcome, this will give an opening to some intelligent cultivators, and it points the way to other fields. Those who are first in raising new or improved plants find a waiting market for them. The Market Growers Gazette of London, England, reports that Mr. A. Finlay, Marsland, Auchtermuchty, Scotland, sold one season to 5 leading growers whose names are given 5 seed potatoes at L20 each, which would be perhaps $500 a peak. He says enthusiastically, it is as perfectly round-shaped a potato as can be imagined. There is a slight dash of pink on the other rim of the eye. My stock of it is very small, only 126 pounds, and I do not care to sell any. If next year's crop yields as well as this year's, we shall have 20 times that quantity. Mr. Finlay has other seed potatoes, just as high priced, for which he wants $125 per pound, which he says means that I do not want to sell any. This shows how progressive people think of the real value of good seed. It is worth mentioning that the land on which these are grown is not highly manured. The only artificial manure that it has received is about 200 pounds of potash per acre. It has the drawback of being rather stony. Of course, this is a fact. It is doubtful if it will pay anyone to give such prices for seed, except to sell to some bigger fool than himself. Of course, also, the market for a particular fancy thing may soon be overstocked, but it seems to be a nice thing for the Findlays meanwhile, and it does good in teaching people to appreciate good things. Yet, the average potato patcher prudently save his small potatoes for next year's seed, which is just as if a breeder were to keep the colts that were too poor to sell, so be the parents of his herd. In the dark age of farming, to wit, in 1881, for this is a true story, a minister of the gospel came into possession by inheritance of a 15-acre farm a short way from Philadelphia. He found the soil a reddish, somewhat gravelly clay, and so worn out from years of cropping that it did not support 2 cows and a horse. City-born and bred, he was encumbered with no knowledge of agriculture, which had to be unlearned. He began a careful and systematic study of the agricultural literature, and ultimately developed a novel system of dairy farming to which he adhered religiously. The farm lying near the city is a high-priced land. For this reason, and because of the limited acreage, the
cows were kept in the barn the year round. For 6 years, his bill for veterinary services was $1.50, while the income from the milk of his 17 cows was about $2,400 a year. In addition, from 4 to 6 head of young cattle were sold annually, netting about $500 a year. As the stock on the farm was stall fed, every particle of plant food contained in the stable manure, liquid as well as solid, was utilized. No fertilizer was ever purchased, yet all of the rock hedge for 30 head of stock was raised on the 13 acres of available soil. Only $625 a year was expended for the concentrated feeding stuffs. The net earnings of the farm for the period averaged more than $1,000 a year, and this was during the early days of his experience. Later, he made more. Professor W. J. Spillman of the Agricultural Department visited him in 1903 and studied the methods employed. Then, he says, the rush to see the farm became so great that the owner had to give it up. Few people who know nothing about it and would then can take even 3 acres and make anything of it. To get the phenomenal yields takes capital, sometimes large capital, wisely spent, sometimes wearied of immense products per acre. This often means the product of a single rod of ground. This gives at the rate of so much per acre, or might if extended. But anyone can take a little bit of ground and use it thoroughly and increase his borders and his knowledge as he goes on. He will find plenty to pay him for doing or teaching whatever he has learned to do that no one else has done. If a man make but a mousetrap better than his fellows, though he makes his tent in the wilderness, the world will beat a path to his door. The mission of the book is accomplished if it interests you to consider the possibilities of making a living on a few acres and leads you to investigate. It is not written as a textbook, for, as has been shown, there are authorities enough cited to supply all the technical information needed. Its sole object is to show what has been done and what can be done on small areas, and to show that life in the country need not be so laborious if the same methods are used which make successes of business in other lines. If it does this and is the means of checking in any degree the reckless trend of people from the country to the cities, the author will feel that his efforts has been well repaid. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ahmad Imam Muhammad, 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall, The Woodlot. If you have a bit of woods on your little farm, take care of it. By intelligent thinning, you can make an average income of $5 per acre from ordinary second growth wildwoods. The cordwood, barrel hoops, fence posts, and so on will decrease your expenses, while the timber will increase in value. That lot is the place to start your boy as a forester. Instructions how to treat the trees can be obtained from your state forestry department or from the National Forest Service at Washington. The care of growing timber is a big subject and requires study, but don't sell your standing timber without their advice. Forestry can hardly be made to pay on a small lot with hired labor or hired teams, and you must not pay much for your woodlot, else interest and taxes will eat up the returns. To be of high quality, timber must be to a considerate proportion of its height, free of limbs which are the cause of knots. It must be tall, and it must not decrease rapidly in diameter from the butt to the top of the last log. In a dense stand of timber, there is very great competition for sunlight among the individual trees, with the result that height growth is increased. Trees in crowded stands are taller than those in uncrowded stands of the same age. When the trees are crowded so that sunlight does not reach the lower branches, these soon die and become brittle. They then fall off or are broken off by the wind, snow, or other agencies. By their process, trunks are formed which are free from limbs and hence of high quality. It is evident, therefore, the trees in the woodlot should be so crowded that the crown or top of each individual tree may be in contact with those of its nearest neighbors. A crowded stand of trees produces not only a larger number but also a greater proportion of high-quality sawlogs than an uncrowded stand. So vital a matter is their forest shade that it does not do to set out young trees which have grown in the forest. Ordinarily, the exposure to the sunlight stuns them and often kills them. Nursery trees are best. The next best are trees that have grown at the edge of the woods. The actual value of woodland as pasture is small. $1 per acre per year is probably a liberal estimate of the value of its forage. Thoroughly fully stocked stands of timber will grow at the rate of 250 or more board feet of lumber per year. Adopting only 250 board feet as the growth and assuming the value of the standing timber to be from $5 to $8 per thousand feet board measure, the value of the timber growth is from $1.25 to $2 per acre per year. If the timber is given good care, moreover, the growth should be as much as 500 board feet per acre per year. The larger value of the woodlot for growing timber as compared to the value of its forage only is therefore apparent. It must not be thought possible to secure this growth of timber and utilize the woodlot for pasture at the same time, because the stock eat the seedlings and damage the trees. If shade, however, rather than forage, is the woodlot's chief value to stock, it can be doubtless be provided by allowing the stock to range in only a portion of the lot. The remainder can more profitably be devoted to the production of wood. Owners are doubtless in some instances indifferent about fires in their woodlots because they do not realize that these may do great harm without giving striking evidence to the fact. They burn the fallen leaves and accumulated litter of several years, thus destroying the material with which trees enrich their own soil. The soil becomes exposed, evaporation is greater, and more of the rain and melted snow runs off the surface. The roots may also be exposed and burned. The vitality of trees is weakened and their rate of growth decreased. Don't burn leaves or waste growth. It is dangerous and they are valuable for mulch and for manure. It has been found in the Paris region that through the protection afforded by the most efficient growth windbreaks, the yield in farm crops is increased to the extent of a crop as large as could be grown on a strip 3 times as wide as the height of the trees. At present, the following states maintain nurseries and distribute young trees either free or practically at cost to planters within the state: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, North Dakota, and Kansas. The name of nurseries which handle stock of certain trees and their quoted prices for all the more important species can be secured from the Forest Service, Washington, D.C. Whether your woodlot pays a profit or not, like the profit from the rest of your land, depends largely on how it is taxed. The higher it is taxed, the harder it is to make it pay. In most states, timberland is assessed on the basis of its value. Timber and land together woodland assessed on this basis is overtaxed as compared with land assessed on the basis of what it produces each year. The value of plowland for farm purposes is established by what it will earn. If the owner can make $10 an acre a year over all expenses by growing, say, wheat, corn, cotton, or alfalfa on it, his land will have a value of perhaps $150 per an acre. If it took 2 years to grow a crop, the land would be worth only half as much. Its owner in that case would kick vigorously if he could not get his assessment lowered. He would kick still more vigorously if he had to pay a tax also on the value of the standing crop. After having to pay too much on the land, the Lord loveth a cheerful kicker. With woodland, the case is still worse. Each year the owner may have to pay a tax on the merchantable crops of many past years. It is as though the owner of plowland had to pay a tax on the value of his field crops twice a week. Throughout the growing season, when a full-grown tree is cut down or burned up in a forest fire, it may have been taxed for 40 or 50 times over. Each year the land on which it grew has been valued not on the basis of its earning power, but on the basis of what it would bring if sold. Timber and all, a tax levied on the income earning value of the land would be much more equitable. Certain states have applied this principle by legislation under which land to be used for growing timber can be classified so that the timber can be taxed separately from the land. The land there is taxed annually on its value. Without timber, the tax on the timber is not paid until the crop is harvested. It is therefore a tax on the field. In New York, this yield tax is 5% of the value of the crop harvested. Michigan 5% of it, Massachusetts 6%, and Vermont, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania 10%, with different provisions for forests already established. Such a method is much better than that adopted by a number of states which exempt, under certain conditions, deforested or reforesting land for a term of years, or allow rebates or bounties on such lands. The profit of a growing forest crop will depend largely on relief from excessive taxation. It is unthrifty public policy to discourage putting wasteland to work. The Farm Woodlot Problem by Herbert A. Smith, editor Forest Service, from Yearbook of Department of Agriculture for 1914. End of chapter 22.
Chapter 23 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall. Some practical experiments. The Department of Agriculture at Washington, also Cornell University and various other schools, publish special studies and monographs of different branches. For some, a small charge is made, but they are mostly distributed free. Many of them are very valuable. The United States Department's pamphlet on the diseases of the violet is a notable example. The average person does not know how these can be obtained or even that they exist. The department's yearbooks are most interesting reading, and both its professors and the state colleges will answer particular questions of citizens. These and the various United States and state experiment station publications will serve instead of most books, except this one, if properly filed, indexed, and cross-indexed so that you can readily turn to all the information on a given subject. On bugs, for instance, before the insects have harvested your crop. I am trying only to suggest things, not to advise, nor to induce my readers to try to do anything that they don't like or have no capacity for. It is difficult to make people understand that. One reader of this book, a dear creature, wrote her experience for a crafts magazine. She got the acres, built her house, and raised one fine crop of swans, nuts grafted on wild trees, partridge berries. No, 3 tons of hay. She called it 3 acres and starving. I called it 3 acres and stupidity. She didn't eat the hay, and the editor wouldn't publish my reply. Everybody raises hay and potatoes, so don't you raise any unless for your own use. Potatoes are a laborious crop, requiring constant care, manuring, cutting the seed eyes, on which there is much uncertain lore, hilling up or down according to drainage and rainfall, spraying with pyrox or dusting with Paris green, and, neither least nor last, bug hunting. The seed is expensive, but for your own use you may plant from whatever seed, otherwise wasted, may grow on the potato vine on the tops of the plants. The crop will be small potatoes in all kinds of varieties, which won't sell in the market, but which will make each dinner a surprise party. You may strike a new and improved strain, though there are over 1,000 varieties of potato listed already. New creations of merit bring good returns, and 'tis the enterprising experimenter that reaps the honor and the harvest, and he is worthy of his reward. To select the most productive plants and breed again from these is, however, a most promising profit plan. Even then, don't plant the tubers unless you will take the pains to soak the seed potatoes in scab preventer. If you won't, likely you will raise mostly scab, and the spores thereof will spoil your ground for potatoes for years. It costs little in money to make it, half a pint of formalin to 15 gallons of water, not guessed but measured gallons, then soak for an hour and a half by the Ingersoll. Don't reckon that 1 little hour or a few will do just as well. With 1 hour they will be underdone and spotty, with 3 overdone and weakly. There's lots to be discovered yet about the spuds. Sawdust is an excellent mulch for them, as for small fruits. When you store any seeds to plant, put carbolic mothballs with them. It checks insects and mice and helps to protect the planted seeds from birds. In a general way, with potatoes and with other things that you want good and plenty, get specific directions and follow them. Most people won't read directions, more can't follow them. Those people have their knives out for book farmers and professors, but you can't improve on experience and experiment by the light of laziness or of nature. A delicate jelly is made out of the red outer pulp of roseberries. It would be romantic to develop a rose fruit from those seed pods, as the peach was developed from the almond. We have invented stranger fruits than that, such as the loganberry and the pomato. But there is better chance for profit in doing the old things better, especially when the experiment costs little or nothing. You can have a strawberry garden on your roof or even on a balcony. This need not be costly. Cinch all the nails on the inside of a stout barrel. Bore half a dozen 2-inch holes in the bottom, or put a layer of stones for drainage. Bore a row of 8 holes around 8 inches from the bottom of the barrel and about 8 inches apart. 8 inches above this, bore a second row of holes, staggered, and a third 8 inches above those. Pile several old tomato cans with perforated bottoms, one on the other, in the center of the barrel. These should be the height of the barrel and placed upright in the middle. This is a conductor down which water should be poured at intervals before the soil gets quite dry. Fill the barrel with soil made of 1/2 loam and 1/2 well-rotted manure. Be sure the manure is not fresh. A little bone meal is a good addition. Now plant the first row of strawberry plants, ever bearing are best, though they don't ever bear. Put each plant inside, spread the roots, and pull the leaves of each out through one of the holes. Press the soil down firmly around each root. Repeat the process for the other 2 rows. Fill the barrel and set, say, 6 plants on the top. That will give you 30 plants, which should grow 10 to 25 quarts of fine berries or more. The illustration makes the holes 12 inches apart for big leafy plants. If there are any more, those will be you. Anyhow, you will know a lot about strawberries at the end of the season. Other things can be grown in the same way. Better than growing vegetables or where dry land can't be obtained is to raise some crop like watercress that usually comes from a distance. Often an otherwise poor season will help a specialty. One year wet weather jumped the price of mint and it sold at double prices. Hot, dry weather is required to make it produce its best. Most of the mint produced in this country for peppermint oil is grown in Michigan. More than 4,000 acres are reported from a single county. Mint oil is worth about $3.50 a pound and costs about $1 to produce. Nice bright dried leaves sell for about 15 cents a pound. The production of mint is sometimes as high as 50 pounds of oil to the acre. The bulk of it is grown on marshlands, which a few years ago were nowhere worth more than a few dollars an acre. The mint is sent to the manufacturers where it is purified and made into flavoring extract or used in chewing gum, etc. Why should we, with our infinite variety of climates, soils, and labor, import from England the coarser varieties of seed of the cabbage family, Savoy, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, or kale? We owe England enough already for the seed of liberty we got from her. California now supplies some seed for onions, carrots, parsnips, and a few others. The finest cauliflower comes mostly from Denmark now. Turnip seed too, mango wurzel and Swedes, onion, pea, bean, carrot, parsnip, radish, and beet seeds could be grown here by the same skill, care, and training as they are grown abroad. An interesting method of forcing plants by the use of hot water baths is described in La Nature, Paris, by Henri Coupin. The process is much simpler than others now in use and may be employed by anyone who has a small greenhouse, no expert treatment being necessary. Says Mr. Coupin, most trees in our countries undergo a period of rest, during which all growth appears to be suspended. Branches do not enlarge and the buds on them remain as they are. They do not arouse from their torpor until spring, first because they find the conditions necessary for their development, and again because during the period of rest, chemical changes have taken place in them. These are indispensable because if they did not occur, the trees, even in the most favorable conditions, would not open their buds. For example, plant branches that have quite recently dropped their leaves in a warm greenhouse. They will not bud, but make the same experiment at the end of several months and the buds will appear. There are several ways of shortening this period of rest, some of which are rather odd. The best known is the process of etherification, which has been so much discussed recently, and which consists in placing the plants to be forced in the vapor of ether or chloroform for 24 to 48 hours. Afterwards, when placed in a hothouse, the branches begin to develop almost immediately. A very ingenious botanist, Hans Molisch, professor in the University of Prague, has devised a method of forcing, simpler still and quite as effective. It consists in plunging the branches into warm water during a time that varies with the species. The best method is to plunge the plants in a reservoir of warm water, head downward, without moistening the roots, which would injure them. After a certain time, the plants are withdrawn, turned right side up with care, and placed in a greenhouse where they develop at once. The duration of the warm bath should be 9 to 12 hours at most. The best temperature is 30 degrees to 35 degrees, 86 degrees to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That is to say, in the majority of cases, one may simply employ the water available in hothouses, which is just at the proper temperature. The process is thus at the disposal of all gardeners. It should be said that the good effects of the hot baths are confined to the parts actually immersed and do not extend to the whole plant. Thus, on the same stem, we may see developing only the branches that have been treated with the bath, while the others remain torpid. This is easy to verify with the lilac or the willow. If Loebner is to be believed, we may substitute for the water bath one of steam. He has obtained good results with the lily of the valley. The thing is possible, but the method used by Molish is more practical. How shall we explain the good effect of warm water on branches in a resting state? We are absolutely ignorant of its mechanism, as we are also in the case of etherification. But if we knew everything, science would be no longer amusing. Condensed from the Literary Digest. There are many new uses for water. It will not be long before every truck and every commercial flower garden will have overhead irrigation. This is merely gas pipes. Seconds, rejected for blowholes or porosity, are usually used. Supported on posts, say 6 feet above the ground. They are usually placed parallel, about 50 feet apart, which will make 4 to the acre square, and have a single row of holes and a handle on each pipe, so that the spray can be turned in either direction. With a high water pressure, often supplied by gravity, they may be farther apart with larger holes. These not only have saved us from fear of drought, but they supply the moisture in the natural manner and at the right time and increase fertility to an astonishing degree. When you take a shower bath yourself, that is overhead irrigation. The gasoline, kerosene, or heavy oil one-man farm tractor, so made that it can be used to plow, to climb a side hill, to run a saw or a pump, is a coming factor in garden and farm advance. Huge fortune awaits the first manufacturer who will standardize it, cheapen it, and specialize on it. The horse is the greatest care and the greatest risk on the little farm. He costs more than a tractor would. He is eating his head off half the time. He can't be worked overtime without injury, not even as much as a man can be. All too soon he dies, more missed than any member of the family. When this is popularized, the 3 acres can well be extended to 5. End of chapter 23, read by Brize C, Ohio.
Chapter 24 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by BettyB. 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall. Some experimental foods. 58 years ago, Abraham Lincoln said, "Population must increase rapidly, more rapidly than in former times, and ere long the most valuable of all arts will be the art of deriving subsistence from the smallest area of soil. No community whose every member possesses this art can ever be the victim of oppression in any of its forms. Such community will alike be independent of crowned kings, money kings, and land kings." The future, it seems, has many strange dishes in store for the American stomach. Whether you are rich or one of the plain people that have to work, whether the idea of new fantastic food appeals to your palate or to your pocketbook, you will be attracted by the array of foreign viands with curious names, which have already been successfully introduced and are now beginning to be marketed in this country. Mr. William N. Taft, in the Technical World magazine, presents the following wild menu for the dinner table: jujube soup, brisket of antelope, boiled petse, dasheen au gratin, creamed udo, soybean and lychee nut salad, yang tao pie, mangoes, kaki, sake. This, he assures us, is not the bill of fare of a Chinese eating house, nor yet of a Japanese restaurant. It is the daily meal of an American family 2 decades hence, if the Department of Agriculture succeeds in its attempt to introduce a large number of new foods in this country for the dual purpose of supplying new dainties and reducing the cost of living. Uncle Sam is determined to decrease the price of food as much as possible, and for this purpose delegated Dr. David S. Fairchild, agricultural explorer in charge of the foreign plant section of the Bureau of Plant Industry, in particular, to see what can be done about it. More than 30,000 fruits and vegetables have been tested by Uncle Sam's experts, and according to Dr. Fairchild, a goodly portion of the foodstuffs which have been regarded as staples since the days of the first settler are doomed. Consider, for example, jujube soup. Mention that to the average person and he will answer, "But I thought the jujube was a fruit, like an apple. How can you make soup of it?" The average person is right. The jujube is a fruit, but a most remarkable one. It is about the size and appearance of a crab apple, but contains only a single seed. It grows on a spiny tree, long and bare of trunk, with its foliage cropping out at the very top like a royal palm of the tropics. The jujube itself has been used for years to flavor candies and other confections, but the essence is very expensive and comparatively rare, despite the profusion with which the fruit grows in its native habitat. Dr. Fairchild, however, imported several specimens for the department's gardens in California, where they are bearing prolifically. The arid sands of the Southwest, where nothing but cactus and sagebrush formerly would grow, have been found to be excellent soil for the jujube, and it is the hope of Uncle Sam's food experts to see the entire Arizona and New Mexico deserts dotted with jujube orchards, with income to their owners. The jujube is delicious eaten raw, but it may be cooked in any manner in which apples are prepared, used as a sauce or for pie, preserved or dried. Finally, its juice may be used as a delicious and highly nutritive fruit broth. Petsay, as the Chinese have it, pisay, is a substitute for the cabbage. In appearance it is as different from cabbage as can be imagined. It is tall and cylindrical, and its leaves are narrow, delicately curled, with frilled edges. The petsay can however be grown on any soil where the ordinary cabbage could be cultivated, and in many sections where the native vegetable would languish. We are told it is no uncommon thing for a petsay to reach 60 pounds in weight. Department of Agriculture officials, however, advise that it be plucked when about 8 pounds in weight, its flavor being the most delicate and appealing. This new importation, Uncle Sam's experts hope, will cause a drop in the price of dinners. Cabbage long ago ceased to be a cheap dish, but petsay requires none of the care which has to be lavished on cabbage and will thrive in almost any climate and any soil. The soybean, once started, grows wild and yields several crops a season. It can be prepared in a multitude of ways, from baking to a delicious salad. According to Dr. Yamai Kin, the head of the Women's Medical School near Peking, milk can be made from it to cost about 6 cents a quart and equal to cow's milk. It would be a blessing if we could get rid of the sacred but unclean cow. One of the state dairy inspectors told me, "We consider milk a filthy product." It may be remembered that only 20 years ago almost all the dates consumed here came from the oases of Arabia and the valley of the Euphrates. Today there are more than 100 varieties successfully produced in California and Arizona. The wonders of today are the commonplaces of tomorrow, and there is no telling to what apparently impossible lengths science will go to relieve people of the burden they now bear in the price of food. It has scoured the ends of the earth for new delicacies, and now experts will do their best to teach the people to use them. Have you ever heard of witloof or Belgian chicory? Or have you ever dined in one of the better restaurants of a large city where they have served during the winter months a salad composed of golden blanched oblong leaves about 2 inches wide and 5 inches long, only the outer edges showing a faint green? It is as delicate as the perfume of roses, as crisp as young lettuce, as delicious as asparagus, and as ornamental upon the table as the freshest fruit. In former years the salad had to be imported, and you had to pay dear for a portion of it. A good reason why so few people know it. A Belgian farmer located near New York has grown many thousands of these plants this past summer. How would you like to grow this dainty salad right in your living room and cut several crops from a single planting lasting nearly 3 months? Secure an 8-inch pot and plant in it 12 roots packed in light sandy soil or pure sand. Invert another but empty 8-inch pot over this to keep out the light. Place in a heated room, water daily, and in from 3 to 4 weeks you will find full-grown crowns, beautifully blanched, ready for cutting. 6 of such crowns make a large portion, sufficient for an entire family. In cutting, do not cut too close to the root, for another growth is made directly after the cutting, which matures in from 3 to 4 weeks. And still 2 other crops can be grown in this way, so that from a single planting 4 full crops can be had. Considering, then, that 8 such treats can be had for the cost of a single dozen roots, we can all now enjoy what was formerly a luxury. This method is most interesting, for you can watch the daily progress of the growth of the roots, fascinating to young and old, and with 3 weekly plantings of a pot each, this treat can be enjoyed twice a week from the 1st of February until May. For those who wish to enjoy it more often or in larger quantities, we suggest the following. Prepare a bed of soil 12 inches deep in your cellar in a dark place where the temperature is always above freezing. Plant the roots as close as their size will permit and cover the crowns with at least 3 inches of soil. On top of this put straw so that when the crowns come through the soil they will not strike the light. When ready to cut, remove the soil as far back as the original root so that you can intelligently cut the growth to produce the crops to follow. As a substitute for the potato of commerce, the dasheen long ago passed the experimental stage. It has been served at a number of banquets in Washington, Philadelphia, and New York. While the tops of potatoes are useless as food, the tops of the dasheen make delicious greens, and tests indicate that good growers can depend on a crop of from 400 to 450 bushels per acre. The udo is the plant intended by the Department of Agriculture as a substitute for asparagus, a delicacy which it closely resembles. It is more prolific than asparagus, grown in the same soil, and requires less attention. Not only plants but animals are experimented with by Uncle Sam's experts. Officials of the Bureau of Animal Industry claim that before long we will partake of antelope steak. For the antelope has been found to be particularly adapted to the more arid western sections of the country. And beyond that, the gastronomist of the future will have to reckon with loin of hippopotamus. The lower valley of the Mississippi is admirably suited to these huge beasts, the flesh of one of which equals a score of cattle. African traveled epicures maintain that hippopotamus steak is as tender and inviting as the choicest beef. For those who like that sort of thing, it is just the sort of thing they would like. It seems a bit remote to urge hippopotamus on us who do not yet know enough to eat sharks, tortoises, painted turtles, or even English sparrows. Anyhow, the small gardener is more likely to succeed raising pheasants than to muss with a hippopotamus, at least in the suburbs. Pigs are more practical and make prettier pets. Our population bids fair to approximate 200 million people within the next 50 years, and because of the exigencies of business, an increasing number of people will be engaged in non-food producing vocations. These people, however, are all consumers and must be fed and clothed, and even now America offers the greatest market for the produce of the farm that any farmer in any country has ever had in all history. One of the coming ways of feeding them is the discovery and use of new foods. As in other things, after the war, whether we live in a better world or not, we shall live in an entirely different world, new ways, strange thoughts, and other foods. For the most of the following, Business America and current opinions are responsible. For the creation of new crop varieties or the improvement of those now in use, we must depend upon the practical scientists who are engaged in plant breeding. The work of one of these, Professor Buffum, has been accomplished in a region that is apparently sterile and where plants grow only by coaxing through artificial moisture. His plant breeding farms near Worland in the Bighorn Basin of northern Wyoming lie at an elevation of 4,000 feet, in a region of almost total natural aridity. After 20 years' work in Western agricultural colleges and government experiment stations, Professor Buffum chose his present location because nowhere in the United States could he find conditions of soil and climate that induced to such a remarkable degree the breaking up of species and mutation or sporting of plants. When the modern plant breeder seeks to produce something new by cross fertilization, a problem is encountered. For many years we were ignorant of the principle on which nature operated in these hybrids or crosses. Finally, a Bohemian priest named Mendel discovered the law. The central principle is that when the seed produced from a cross between two different species is planted, the progeny breaks up into well-defined groups. A certain percentage of the plants resemble one of the parents, a smaller percentage are like the other parent, and the rest seems to be a blend of both parents. These intermediates will not breed true to themselves, however. If a seed from them is planted, the progeny will split up into groups, showing the same percentages as the first generation to which they belonged. This has been generally accepted by scientists. In many of his productions, Professor Buffum apparently has set the Mendelian law at defiance, for by cross fertilization he has evolved plants which breed true to themselves, and their progeny does not break up into groups according to the accepted theory. They show specimens resembling each parent, with the third composed of seemingly but not really blended specimens. These results are particularly vital in the development of plants adapted by selection for semi-arid agriculture. The professor believes that the great areas of high plain country to be found from Canada to Mexico can be made more productive through planting crop varieties that have been bred to withstand the existing conditions which produce meager returns from the vast expanse of territory under the present methods. In place of corn, which is difficult to mature even at moderate elevations, Professor Buffum has introduced improved emmers and the various hybrids resulting from crosses with other grains. Emmer itself is not a new grain, having been grown for centuries in Russia and southern Europe, and it is believed to have been the corn of Pliny, which he said was used by the Latins for several centuries before they knew how to make bread. Several years ago emmer began receiving attention as a stock food. The first planting of the grain at Worland resulted in some exceptional sports, seemingly of a different type, with coarse straw and very large heads. With this as a basis, the seed was replanted and subjected to many experiments to increase its drought and winter resisting qualities. Continued selections have shown a yield of from a third more to twice as much corn, that it is 30% more valuable than oats for feeding horses, and that for stock fattening it is equal to corn pound for pound. It is the most drought resistant and prolific of small grains, has been successfully raised from Montana to Mexico, and is being planted in Louisiana to replace oats because it is not affected by rust. Some of the yields recorded are enormous, varying from 40 to 104 bushels per acre under dry farming and as high as 152 bushels under irrigation. One stalk of Turkey red wheat was noticed as differing in many ways from all varieties, principally that the head was over 8 inches in length, whereas the ordinary Turkey red wheat commonly used in the West has a head of only 4 or 5 inches. From this one stalk has been developed the Buffum No. 17 winter wheat. The heavy beards were eliminated and the grains or kernels in each spikelet increased from the normal number of 3 to 5, 7, and even 9. The hardiness of the new variety, together with its remarkably large head, means that when it is placed on the market the farmers who sow it need not fear winter killing, and will have a splendid flowering grain, which will produce nearly double the average crop per acre. It is said that if a single kernel could be added to each head of wheat, the increase in annual production of this country would amount to over 15 million bushels. If fodder crops can be substituted for a part of the corn now used for stock, it will be a great gain. In his alfalfa breeding garden, Professor Buffum is raising over 70 different kinds gathered from all parts of the world, showing that the plant is capable of wide variations. One hybrid has been obtained by crossing sweet clover with alfalfa. The clover grows wild in every state in the Union. There seems to be no limit to man's ingenuity and skill in plant improvement. Perhaps sometime we will try it with our children. In 30 years, an exceptional ear of dent corn, through continued planting and careful selection each succeeding season, resulted in a few days shortening of the growing period and an increased resistance to the cool nights of the higher elevation where it was under improvement. Today this corn matures about the middle of August at an altitude of 4,000 feet and has been yielding 40 to 60 bushels per acre. End of chapter 24.
Chapter 25 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall. Dried truck. As a war measure, the surplus vegetables in many city markets have been forced by the governments into large municipal drying plants. Community dryers have been established in the trucking regions, and even itinerant drying machines have been sent from farm to farm, drying the vegetables which otherwise would have gone to waste. The drying of vegetables may seem strange to the present generation, but we are very young. To our grandmothers, it was no novelty. Many housewives, even today, prefer dried sweet corn to the canned, and find also that dried pumpkin and squash are excellent for pie making. Snap beans often are strung on threads and dried above the stove. Cherries and raspberries still are dried on bits of bark for use instead of raisins. This country is producing large quantities of perishable foods every year, which should be saved for storage, canned, or properly dried. Drying is not a panacea for the waste evil, nor should it take the place of storing or canning to any considerable extent where proper storage facilities are available, or tin cans or glass jars can be obtained cheap. For the farmer's wife, the new methods of canning are probably better than sun-drying, which require a somewhat longer time. But dried material can be stored in receptacles which cannot be used for canning. Then, too, canned fruit and vegetables freeze and cannot be shipped as conveniently in winter. Dried vegetables can be compacted and shipped or stored with a minimum of risk. String them up to the ceiling of the storeroom or attic. A few apples or sweet potatoes or peas or even a single turnip can be dried and saved. Even when very small quantities are dried at a time, a quantity sufficient for a meal will soon be secured. Small lots of dried vegetables, such as cabbage, carrots, turnips, potatoes, and onions, can be combined to advantage for soups and stews. In general, most fruits or vegetables, to be dried quickly, must first be shredded or cut into slices, because many are too large to dry quickly or have skins the purpose of which is to prevent drying out. If the air applied at first is too hot, the cut surfaces of the sliced fruits or vegetables become hard or scorched, covering the juicy interior so that it will not dry. Generally, it is not desirable that the temperature in drying should go above 140 degrees to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is better to keep it well below this point. Insects and insect eggs are killed by the heat. It is important to know the degree of heat in the dryer, and this cannot be determined accurately except by a thermometer. Inexpensive oven thermometers can be found on the market, or an ordinary chemical thermometer can be suspended in the dryer. Drying of certain products can be completed in some dryers within 2 or 3 hours. When sufficiently done, they should be so dry that water cannot be pressed out of the freshly cut pieces. They should not show any of the natural grain of the fruit on being broken, and yet not so dry as to snap or crackle. They should be leathery and pliable. When freshly cut fruits or vegetables are spread out, they will immediately begin to evaporate moisture into the air, and if in a closed box, will very soon saturate the air with moisture. This will slow down the rate of drying and lead to the formation of molds. If a current of dry air is blown over them continually, the water in them will evaporate steadily until they are dry and crisp. Certain products, especially raspberries, should not be dried hard, because if too much moisture is removed from them, they will not resume their original form when soaked in water. The rotary hand slicer is adapted for use on a wide range of material. Don't slice your hand with it. From 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch is a fair thickness for most of the common vegetables to be sliced. To secure fine quality, much depends upon having the vegetables absolutely fresh, young, tender, and perfectly clean. One decayed root may flavor several kettles of soup if the slices from it are scattered through a batch of material. High-grade root vegetables can only be made from peeled roots. Blanching consists of plunging the vegetables into boiling water for a short time. Use a wire basket or cheesecloth bag for this. After blanching as many minutes as is needed, drain well and remove the surface moisture from vegetables by placing them between 2 towels or by exposing them to the sun and air for a short time. A mosquito net is thrown over the product to protect the slices from flies and other insects. Fruits and vegetables, when dried in the sun, generally are spread on large trays of uniform size, which can be stacked one on top of the other, and protected from rain by covers made of oilcloth, canvas, or roofing paper. A very cheap tray can be made of lath 3/4 of an inch thick and 2 inches wide, which form the sides and ends of a box, and smooth lath, which is nailed on to form the bottom. As builders' laths are 4 feet long, these lath trays are most economical of materials when made 4 feet in length. A cheap and very satisfactory dryer for use over the kitchen stove can be made by any handyman of small mesh galvanized wire netting and laths or strips of wood about 1/2 inch thick and 2 inches wide. By using 2 laths nailed together, the framework can be stiffened and larger trays made if desirable. This form can be suspended from the ceiling over the kitchen range or over a clear burning oil, gasoline, or gas stove, and it will utilize the hot air which rises during the cooking hour. It can be raised out of the way or swung to one side by a pulley or by a crane made of lath. When the stove is required for cooking, the frame is lowered or swung back to utilize the heat which otherwise would be wasted. Still another home dryer is the cook stove oven. Bits of food, leftovers, especially sweet corn, can be dried on plates in a very slow oven or on the back of the cook stove and saved for winter use. Where the electric juice is not monopolized, an electric fan in drying is economical, especially for those who already have a fan. Many sliced fruits placed in long trays 3 by 1 foot and stacked in 2 tiers end to end before an electric fan can be dried within 24 hours. Some require much less time. For instance, sliced string beans and shredded sweet potatoes will dry before a fan running at a moderate speed within a few hours. The dried fruit or vegetables must be protected from insects and rodents, also from the outside moisture, and will best keep in a cool, dry, well-ventilated place. In the more humid regions, moisture-tight containers should be used. If a small amount of dried product is put in each receptacle, just enough for 1 or 2 meals, it will not be necessary to open a large container. Your American ingenuity and the American practice of reading will show you a lot of ways for saving waste. For example, frozen potatoes are not necessarily spoiled. We are told by Mr. de Ronzik, a writer for the Revue Agricole. They may be dried and then cooked as usual. The Revue Scientifique, Paris, abstracting the article in question, says, "The potatoes must be dried to prevent decomposition, which takes place very rapidly after they have thawed out. The oven should be heated as for baking bread. Then, when it has reached the necessary temperature, which is easily recognized, the potatoes are put in, cutting up the largest. They are spread out in a layer so that evaporation can easily take place, the door of the oven being left open. From time to time, the mass is stirred up with a poker to facilitate the evaporation. When the drying has gone far enough, the potatoes having become hard as bits of wood, they are withdrawn to make room for others. Potatoes thus dried may be boiled with enough water to make a paste similar to that which they would have furnished if mashed in the ordinary manner, and which will answer very well, at least to feed stock. The potatoes will be found to have lost none of their nutritive value. Even if you haven't any acres, yet there isn't any law against drying in the city. Either in sales or in saving, it will help pay for the country place later, and the country place can be made to pay it back again. Call your product, say, Lander's Desiccated Beans or Glory's Dehydrated Corn. They will sell better. They may even taste better, trying to live up to the description. There's dollars in a name. As a preservative, ice must not be neglected. The country gentleman says, while the temperature is below the freezing point, we should take advantage of even short frosts to lay up ice for next summer. The man without an ice pond need not be without ice. He can freeze it in pans outdoors. An ice plant of this sort will cost from $15 to $20. A double tank should be made of galvanized iron. The inner compartment of this tank should be 10 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 12 inches deep. The top of the tank should be slightly wider than the bottom. The inner tank should be divided into 6 compartments by means of galvanized iron strips. The double tank should be placed near the outdoor pump or stream where it can easily be filled. Being exposed on all sides, the water will freeze in from 1 hour to 3 hours. A bucket of hot water poured into the space between the tanks will loosen the cakes of ice, each weighing 200 pounds. 4 tons of ice will last the average family a year. The cakes may be packed away in the ice house as they are frozen. End of chapter 25, read by Brize C, Ohio.
Chapter 26 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christine Rottger. 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall. Chapter 26. Home Cold Pack Canning. To save vegetables and fruits by canning is a patriotic duty. The war makes the need for food conservation more imperative than at any time in history. America is mainly responsible for the food supply of the world. In this way, the abundance of the summer may be made to supply the needs of the winter. By the modern cold pack method, it is as easy to can vegetables as to can fruits. Some authorities say it is easier. At any rate, it is more useful. In the cold pack method of canning, sterilization does away with the danger of spoilage by fermentation or working. Sterilization consists in raising the temperature of the filled jar or can to a germ-killing point and holding it there until bacterial life is destroyed. The word container is used to designate either the tin can or the glass jar. Single-period cold pack canning, as distinguished from old-fashioned preserving, offers a saving in time, labor, and expense, and satisfactory results. As the foodstuffs are placed in the containers before sterilization, they are cold and may be handled quickly and easily. Then the sterilization period is frequently short. This is time-saving. Finally, no rich preservatives such as thick syrups or heavily spiced solutions are required. Fruits may be put up in thin syrups. Vegetables require only salt for flavoring and water to fill the container. Another advantage of this method is that it is practicable to put up food in small quantities. It pays to put up even a single container. Thus, when there is a small surplus of some garden crop, or something left over from the order from the grocers, one can take the short time necessary to place this food in a container and store it for future use. This is true household efficiency, the kind which, if practiced on a national scale, will conserve our war food supply and will, after the war, cut heavily into the high cost of living. There are 5 principal methods of canning. 1. The cold pack single period method. 2. The intermittent or fractional sterilization method. 3. The cold water method. 4. The open kettle or hot pack method. And 5. The vacuum seal method. Of these, the one worked out on scientific lines by leading experts and used by many commercial canners is so much the best method for home canning because of its simplicity and effectiveness that it is recommended by the National Emergency Food Commission, and the details are explained in their manual. The cold water method can be used effectively in putting up rhubarb, green gooseberries, and a few other sour berry fruits. The process is simple. The fruit is first prepared and washed and then blanched, and finally packed practically raw in containers, which are next filled with cold water and then sealed. Some sour fruits packed in this way will keep indefinitely. A serviceable outfit may be made of materials found in any household. All that is necessary is a vessel to hold the jars or cans, such as a wash boiler or a large tin pail. This should have a tight-fitting cover. Provide a false bottom of wood or a wire rack to allow for free circulation of water under the containers. While suburban gardeners with large surplus of vegetables find it desirable to use tin cans, being more easily handled for commercial purposes, most of us find glass jars the more satisfactory and economical containers for canned vegetables and fruits. This is especially true when there is a shortage of tin cans. All types of jars that seal perfectly may be used. Use may be made of those to which one is accustomed or which may be already on hand. The rubbers must be sound, but the glass jars may be used indefinitely. Glass jars are adapted for use in any of the cold pack canning outfits. Be sure that no jar is defective. For use in the storing of products which are already sterilized, such as jellies, jams, and preserves, and the bottling of fruit juices, housewives may practice effective thrift by saving all jars in which they receive dried beef, bacon, peanut butter, and other products and bottles that have contained olives, catsup, and kindred goods. Blanching is important with most vegetables and many fruits. It consists of plunging them into boiling water for a short time. Spinach and other greens should be blanched in steam. To do this, place them in an ordinary steamer or suspend them in a tightly closed vessel above an inch or 2 of boiling water. Blanching should be followed by the cold dip, plunging into cold water after removal from the hot water. Cold dipping hardens the pulp and preserves the original color, enhancing the appearance. Blanching cleanses the articles and removes excess acids and strong flavors and odors. It also causes shrinkage so that a larger quantity may be packed in a container. After blanching and cold dipping, surface moisture should be removed by placing the vegetables or fruits between 2 towels or by exposure to the sun. All this is so simple and the directions so easily followed that the average 12-year-old may successfully can vegetables or fruits. The steps and the precautions are: 1. Select sound vegetables and fruits. If possible, can them the same day they are picked. Wash, clean, and prepare them. 2. Have ready on the stove a can or pail of boiling water. 3. Place the vegetables or fruits in a cheesecloth or in some other porous receptacle. A wire basket is excellent for dipping and blanching them in the boiling water. 4. Put them whole into the boiling water. The commission gives a timetable for blanching. After the water begins to boil, begin to count the blanching time. This varies from 1 to 20 minutes according to the vegetable or fruit. 5. When the blanching is complete, remove the vegetables or fruits from the boiling water and plunge them a number of times into cold water to harden the pulp and check the flow of coloring matter. Do not leave them in cold water. 6. The containers must be thoroughly clean. It is not necessary to sterilize them in steam or boiling water before filling them, as in the cold pack process, both the insides of the containers and the contents are sterilized. The jars should be heated before being filled in order to avoid breakage. 7. Pack the product into the containers, leaving about 1/4 inch of space at the top. 8. With vegetables, add 1 level teaspoon of salt to each quart container and fill with boiling water. With fruits, use syrups. 9. With glass jars, always use a good rubber. Test the rubber by stretching or turning inside out. Fit on the rubber and put the lid in place. If the container has a screw top, do not screw up as hard as possible, but use only the thumb and little finger to tighten it. This makes it possible for the steam to escape and prevents breakage. If a glass top jar is used, snap the top bail only, leaving the lower bail loose during sterilization. Tin cans should be completely sealed. 10. Place the filled and capped containers on the rack in the sterilizer. If the homemade or commercial hot water bath outfit is used, enough water should be in the boiler to come at least 1 inch above the tops of the containers, and the water, in boiling out, should never be allowed to drop to the level of these tops. Begin to count processing time when the water begins to boil. At the end of the sterilization period, remove the containers from the sterilizer. Fasten covers on tightly at once. Turn the containers upside down to test for leakage. Leave in this position until cold, and then store in a cool, dry place. Be sure that no draft is allowed to blow on the glass jars, as it may cause breakage. 11. If jars are to be stored where there is strong light, wrap them in paper, preferably brown, as light will fade the color of products canned in glass jars and sometimes deteriorate the food value. That's the whole trick. End of chapter 26.
Chapter 27 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall. Retail Cooperation. Cooperation in buying supplies at wholesale, in standardizing and shipping crops, in keeping grain in elevators, and fruit and some meats and poultry in cold storage, has reached a high development among the farmers, largely in the Northwest, much ahead of us city folks. There are more than 5,000 active farmers' cooperation associations in the United States. Minnesota alone has over 600 cooperative creameries, some of which have a laundry annex. The associations have 660,000 members and do a business of nearly $1,000 a year for each member. These are the people that we call hayseeds. If we could plant some more such seeds, it would be a good job. But in cooperative retail domestic supply, we are far behind England and other countries, even behind Russia. That is partly because our better retail business methods leave less room for the savings. A simple and easy but important beginning of cooperation was where each one took turns in delivering the milk and fetching supplies. One farmer might do it all every day for a small charge. The New South is developing a great business in this line. When you go to New Orleans, look up the stores whose letterhead reads Nelson Cooperative Association, Inc., Food Suppliers, Office, 506 South Peters Street, Creamery, Erato Street, Warehouse, 511 South Peters Street, Bakery, Elysian Fields Avenue, 61 retail stores, 4 meat markets. In August 1917, N.O. Nelson of the above concern writes in answer to my request, "It does not take 2,500 words to tell all I know about cooperation. I trust the enclosed may be serviceable for your book and shall feel proud if it is. I am doing my job here for 2 very practical reasons. First, the immediate service of reducing the cost of living to, say, 15,000 families, mostly poor. Second, to introduce economy in retailing. The readers of such a book as yours are well aware of the wasteful ways of retailing goods. In every town and city there is a multiplication of stores, advertising clerks, teams, and other incidentals. Likewise, there is a lot of middlemen and drummers, the buyers at the producer's end, the wholesalers or middlemen at the consumer's end, with speculator and landowner at both ends. All of these have to be supported by the system, and the dear consumer pays for it. The cooperative store system, which was started in England 73 years ago, eliminates most of these waste expenses. The system has kept spreading at an astonishing rate. In Great Britain there are now 3.5 million members, and more than $1 billion of sales a year. Other European countries are full of these stores. Many of the retail stores have from 12,000 to 50,000 members. Their sales run into the millions. They are federated in a wholesale agency which buys for them and manufactures on an extensive scale. By the economies thus introduced, they are able to save regularly about 15%, besides paying interest on the capital employed and accumulating a liberal surplus. It is simply a question of people getting together, all civilization is, contributing their own money and their trade, and thus avoiding all the waste expenses. It is a very democratic plan. Anybody is welcome to join it. Every member has 1 vote and no more. They elect their directors, the directors elect the managers, and the managers employ the clerks. They sell at the market prices, and every 3 or 6 months take account of stock and rebate the profits in proportion to each member's purchases, with half rate to non-members. It appeals to the economical sense of the ordinary housekeeper and to the ethical sense of those who want no advantage of their neighbor. It prevents some from getting unduly rich, and it helps to keep many from being unduly poor. The same principle has spread into farmers' work, especially creameries. In cooperative creameries and stores, Russia has grown faster in the last 15 years than any other country, having, at last reports, over 13 million members. This orderly getting together for common social needs has much to do with the orderliness of the Russian Revolution. The United States has made large progress in producers' cooperative associations, but not much in stores. I have in New Orleans a system of 65 stores on a modified system. It is a cooperative association, but we sell at as low prices as can be afforded for cash in hand. The sales amount to about 2.5 million, the most of it in the winter. The association owns a bakery, a creamery, condiment factory, and coffee factory, and a 1,550-acre plantation. We are able to undersell the market about 20%. People anywhere can make a cooperative store if they take it seriously. There should be about 200 members and $2,000 in cash to start with. Then get an honest and intelligent manager. Start with a grocery, buy and sell for cash, either on the Rochdale plan of selling at full market prices and dividing the profits periodically, or on my plan of selling as cheaply as can be afforded. In either plan, it works out into producing a large part of the goods sold, thus eliminating entirely the superfluous middleman. 3 acres and liberty is the correct way of producing a living, with the adjunct of a cooperative store to do the selling of the surplus produced and the buying of goods needed. The small farmer is free from all the waste and trammels of trade. Now, what's the matter with helping your county and country and humanity by organizing those 200 waiting buyers in your own town? You can be the honest and intelligent manager at a decent salary. If later the cooperators want another manager, why, you can easily organize another store. The best information on this subject is the Cooperative News, Manchester, England, subscription $2. Evidence is daily accumulating that the food and farm problem is not so easy as many thought it to be a few months ago. This is made clear when economists say, the really important question in the food problem is not distribution, it is production. It is unfortunate that this statement should gain belief at this time, when those who prey upon the producer are watching for any support from whatever direction. Passing by the obvious fact that production must precede distribution, notice that with all the energy that has been devoted to production of farm products by the government experts, it is clear that not only is there a shortage, but that it has required all kinds of inducements from the president down to get the farmers to increase their output, the most potent of all being the cry of patriotism. Some explain this by showing how land monopoly prevents men going back to the farms. While this is perfectly true, it does not answer the question why farmers, now in possession of farms, are not working them near their capacity. The answer of the ordinary man to this is inefficiency on the part of the farmer, and up to the present this idea has passed as sufficient to account for the situation. The publicity given the whole farm question during the past 6 months, however, has to a large extent dispelled the inefficiency answer, as the farmer has responded so completely to the call, and the amateurs are beginning to realize that there is something in farming besides tickling the earth with a feather. All the facts so far brought out show the farmer abundantly able to produce all the foodstuffs needed, provided he has a reasonable certainty that he will be able to dispose of his produce at a price that will give him a fair return for his labor. This being the case, it is easy to see that putting more men back on farms would not remedy the condition we are now in, but would rather increase the difficulty. The fact is, the 2 blades of grass theory has been exploded. The increased production cry has been tried out, carried to its logical conclusion, and found wanting. And the inefficiency explanation has been proved a falsehood on its face. It is, therefore, obvious that with a proper system of distribution, the entire question of production will take care of itself. But just so long as the producers find it unprofitable to produce food, just so long will they have to figure carefully not to grow too much, or it would be better for them had they grown nothing at all. The reason why we have such divergent ideas on this subject is that so many people write about it who have had no experience in farming, while on the other hand there are few farmers who can state the case so the public can grasp the most obvious facts. Finally, it is a question of the government doing what it ought not to have done, and leaving undone those things it ought to have done. It has granted to a few monopolies transportation and terminal facilities which enable them to hold up deliveries and thus control prices. The remedy lies in seeing that the government attend to its own business, which is securing equality of opportunity for all and special privileges to none. It follows that cooperation should not stop either at production or at distribution. It must embrace the source of both, nor even stop at governmental plans of small holdings. As a business enterprise combining philanthropy and percentage, capital has an opportunity. Accordingly, an option should be secured upon a large piece of land not over 40 miles from a large city, near a railroad station. The transportation at first is not important, as the new commuters will make a demand for it, and cheap autos will largely fill the gap. It will improve rapidly. If possible, it should have a lake or a fair stream on it for irrigation and small water power. The soil should be examined by experts to see that it is suitable for trucking and market gardening. The object should be to make a sort of vacant lot gardening plan on a grand scale. Heretofore, the trouble has been that we have been unable to get land where there was any assurance that we could have it again the second year, and that the limited amount of land makes it impossible to give the men as much as they ought to have. They do not need much land, because a man working at intensive culture, with only the rough plowing done for him, cannot take good care of much more than 1 acre of land. He will probably make as much money out of 1 acre of land as he will out of 2. Those who are willing to work should be given 1 acre of land, with the assurance that they can have it as long as they work it faithfully and comply with the simple rules which we have found so effective in the vacant lot gardening work, which are, practically, that a man should attend to business and not annoy his neighbors. No contract or lease should be given the men, or indeed the women, for both work such gardens, as they have been doing for the past 20 years in several large cities, making at least a living upon the land, and often a very large return. There must be a competent superintendent, for everything depends upon him, who would show the men what land they should use, what they should put in, instruct them how to do it, and market their products cooperatively. Experience in Philadelphia and in some score of other cities where they have established vacant lot gardens shows that about 10% annually of the people prefer to work for others, and consequently take places in the country after they have learned to do market gardening. Some others, being dissatisfied with so little land, and wanting to own their own place, go off and buy land or lease it for themselves. This makes a constant drain from the gardens, leaving openings for others who will learn in time their trade. It is possible to make in this way a steady drain out of the cities to the country, and what is better still, an automatic drain. The land must be so near to a center of population that it may be possible to take a gang of men down there in the morning, show them what it is, and send back those who do not seem likely to make good, or who are dissatisfied, and that when men get their gardens successfully running, they may be able to bring their friends there to see what they have done, and say to them, "Go thou and do likewise." I have been at Trudeau, Saranac Lake, and at Stony Wold, the consumptive sanitariums, and found there, both by observation and by testimony, that to send back the convalescents to the bench or the workshop from which they came is practically to repronounce upon them the sentence of death from which the sanitarium has offered them a reprieve. The only practical thing to do with such convalescents, and with such persons who are not capable of their ordinary avocations, is to get them in some way upon the land. There is a large demand for persons who understand the new intensive gardening, and places can be found for more than we can hope to educate in that line. There should be buildings upon the land sufficient to bunk 100 to 150 men. Accommodations could be made with the small timber for a considerable number. Many of these men would need some help, but most of them would shift for themselves if only they could get the opportunity to build upon the land and to have a secure tenure of it. A mere tenant knows that it is bunkum when he says, "our country." It is perfectly practicable to sell about 1/2 of the land in a year or two, and have 1,000 acres or more left free and clear, which will cost the promoters nothing. Renting this out or selling it will repay the whole cost, and probably bring a large profit besides. This is no experiment. It is only to do the thing that we have been doing under various conditions with various sorts of men in different localities for the past 20 years in the vacant lot gardens. Namely, to give men the opportunity of living upon and cultivating land, putting up their own tents, shacks, or bungalows, and giving them such instruction and such help as does not cost anything more than the salary of the superintendent. There are abundant men who can make good and shift for themselves under those circumstances. The men who are available are single men, such men as those for whom Mr. Hallamond, a clergyman working in the Bowery, has been finding rural employment in the past 10 years. Also, many families will come to us through the vacant lot gardens and the little land agitation. People such as these will increase the land value, for every decent man carries around with him at least $500 worth of increase in land values, which his presence adds to somebody's holdings of land. The struggle to pocket this increase accounts for much of the human drift from the field to the factory. God made the country, man made the city, and the devil made the suburbs by the aid of the speculator. Alpha of the Plough says in the London Star, "I was walking with a friend along the Spaniards' Road the other evening, talking on the inexhaustible theme of these days, when he asked, 'What is the biggest thing that has happened to this country as the outcome of the war?' 'It is within 200 or 300 yards from here,' I replied. 'Come this way, and I'll show it to you.' He seemed a little surprised, but accompanied me cheerfully enough as I turned from the road and plunged through the gorse and the trees towards Parliament Fields, until we came upon a large expanse of allotments, carved out of the great playground, and alive with figures, men, women, and children, some earthing up potatoes, some weeding onion beds, some thinning out carrots, some merely walking along the patches and looking at the fruits of their labor springing from the soil. 'There,' I said, 'is the most important result of the war.' He laughed, but not contemptuously. He knew what I meant, and I think he more than half agreed. And I think you will agree, too, if you will think what that stretch of allotments means. It is the symptom of the most important revival, the greatest spiritual awakening this country has seen for generations. Wherever you go, that symptom meets you. Here in Hampstead, allotments are as plentiful as blackberries in autumn. A friend of mine who lives in Beckenham tells me there are 1,500 in his parish. In the neighborhood of London there must be many thousands. In the country as a whole there must be hundreds of thousands. If dear old Joseph Fells could revisit the glimpses of the moon and see what is happening, see the vacant lots and waste spaces bursting into onion beds and potato patches, what joy would be his! He was the forerunner of the revival, the passionate pilgrim of the vacant lot. But his hot gospel fell on deaf ears, and he died just before the trumpet of war awakened the sleeper. Do not suppose that the greatness of this thing that is happening can be measured in terms of food. That is important, no doubt, but it is not the most important thing. I am confident that it will add more than anything else to the spiritual resources of the nation. It is the beginning of a war on the disease that is blighting our people. What is wrong with us? What is the root of our social and spiritual ailment? Is it not the divorce of the people from the soil? For generations, the wholesome red blood of the country has been sucked into the great towns, and we have built up a vast machine of industry that has made slaves of us, shut out the light of the fields from our lives, left our children to grow like weeds in the slums, rootless and waterless, poisoned the healthy instincts of nature implanted in us, and put in their place the rank growths of the streets. Can you walk through a working-class district or a Lancashire cotton town with their huddle of airless streets without a feeling of despair coming over you at the sense of this enormous perversion of life into the arid channels of death? Can you take pride in an empire on which the sun never sets when you think of the courts in which, as Will Crooks says, the sun never rises? And now the sun is going to rise. We have started a revolution that will not end until the breath of the earth has come back to the soul of the people. The tyranny of the machine is going to be broken. The tyranny of the land monopoly is going to be lifted. Yes, you say, but these people that I see working on the allotments are not the people from the courts and the slums, but professional men, the superior artisan, and so on. That is true. But the movement must get hold of the intelligentsia first. The important thing is that the breach in the prison is made. The fresh air is filtering in. The idea is born. Not stillborn, mind you, but born, a living thing. It is a way of salvation that will not be lost, and that all will travel. We have found the land, and we are going back to possess it. Take a man out of the street and put him in a garden, and you have made a new creature of him. I have seen the miracle again and again. I know a bus conductor, for example, outwardly the most ordinary of his kind. But one night I mentioned allotments, touched the key of his soul, and discovered that this man was going about his daily work irradiated by the thought of his garden triumphs. He had got a new purpose in life. He had got the spirit of the earth in his bones. It is not only the humanizing influence of the garden, it is its democratizing influence too. When Adam delved and Eve span, where was then the gentle man? You can get on terms with the lowliest if you will discuss gardens. End of chapter 27.
Chapter 28 of 3 Acres and Liberty. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by BettyB. 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall. Summer Colonies for City People. Condensed from the annual report of the U.S. Department of the Interior of the Commissioner of Education, Volume 2, now out of print. Berlin has not been boastful of a new sociological feature which it has developed within the last 15 years, a feature so revolutionary in its bearing upon education and upon the general health of future generations that it should be made known to the world. As yet, little has been said about this new agency. It may be because it is not a governmental institution, but the result of self-help and of the recognition of a plain necessity. It may be assumed that if the summer colonies had been instituted by the government for the great majority who are poor, it would not have succeeded so well as it has. The teachers, seeing that the horizon of their pupils was limited by brick and mortar, for open park spaces are rare in Berlin, came to the conclusion that only by giving their pupils opportunity to live in the open air Could they lay a sound foundation of knowledge of natural objects and processes as a basis for school studies? The teachers of themselves, however, could apply only palliative remedies, such as having sent to them from the botanical gardens thousands of specimens of plants, twigs, flowers, fruit, etc., for nature study in the schoolroom, planting flower beds around the schoolhouses, also brief excursions into parks, and hanging up before the class colored pictures of landscapes and rural scenery. While in many cases, especially in large cities, the necessity was recognized of getting the children out of the great desert of brick and mortar into the open air and into companionship with life in the field, the garden, the brooks, and the woods, it had nowhere resulted in a systematic effort to aid the children of an entire city in that way, until it was tried in Berlin. Of course, it is well understood, not only abroad, but in New York and in other large cities of this country, that something must be done to alleviate the want of space and fresh air, and so recreation piers and roof gardens are provided, excursions of schools into parks are undertaken, open air playgrounds are instituted, and similar efforts are made tending to mitigate the evil effects of city life. But all these efforts are merely sporadic or temporary. They do not attack the evil at the roots. Moreover, they are only drops in the bucket when compared with that which is necessary. This tendency to cooperative and collective action has resulted in this particular case in thousands of the children's arbor gardens round about the city. It is an experience en gros, one of such dimensions that cavil ceases and admiration rise supreme. The German poor are very poor indeed, but parents were induced to rent, at a price of 4 marks ($1), or about 20 cents a month, from May to October, for the summer season, a patch of land in the suburbs of Berlin, unfit for farmland, because cut up by railroad tracks and newly laid out streets. On one of these patches a family might erect an arbor, or a small structure of boards with a wide veranda and a corrugated iron roof, for housing themselves and children during the summer months. The dwellings are of the most primitive kind and rather flimsy. No permanent structure can be allowed, for at any time the owner of the land may give notice to vacate for the purpose of erecting a row of houses, railroad buildings, or other permanent structures. The tenants themselves build fences of wire or plant hedges to keep the different plots apart. On these patches the children, under the guidance of teachers, parents, and appointed guardians, begin to sow flower seeds, plant shrubs, vines, and trees, or raise kitchen vegetables, each group or family according to its own desires and needs. Since the arbors are small, they do not decrease the arable land of the allotments much, and there is still room left for swings, gymnastic apparatus, and similar contrivances, as well as bare sandy spots for little tots to play in. The various allotments are mostly uniform in size and are reached by narrow 3 or 4 foot lanes, on which occasionally are seen probationary officers or guardians who keep the peace and settle cases of disturbance. The arbor gardens are established on every square rod of unused land round about the city, on vacant lots, far out to the borders of the well-trained woods and royal forests. Small tradesmen, laboring men, civil officials of low degrees, etc., have found it profitable to forsake their tenements in the city and move kith and kin into those arbor colonies. The tenements in Berlin are as bad as in our own big cities, only better policed. Not all of these arbor gardens are occupied by families during the night. Thousands return to their city homes evenings. Some parents, unable to free themselves from toil in town, send their children under guidance of servants, and spend only occasional Sundays and holidays with them. The people, especially the children, getting some information concerning the treatment of the crops from competent advisors in school and out in the arbor colonies, derive great good from their horticultural and floricultural work. Families who are aesthetically inclined devote their space to flowers and trailing vines exclusively. Others, utilitarians from necessity, plant potatoes, carrots, turnips, beets, beans, strawberries, and the like. the feeling of ownership being strongly developed in the children in seeing the results of their own labor. The crops are respected by the neighbors, and pilfering rarely occurs, except perhaps in a case of great hunger. Several hundred or 1,000 of such patches of land or gardens situated in close proximity to each other form an arbor colony, which has a governor or mayor who is an unpaid city official. He arranges the leasing of the land, collects the rents, and hands them over to the gratified landowners who don't even have to collect them. There is always a retired merchant or civil officer to fill the office, to which is attached neither title, emolument, nor special honor. He is assisted by a colonial committee of trustees selected from the colonists, who act as justices of the peace in case disturbances should arise. If colonists prove frequent disturbers of the peace or are found incapable of living quietly, their leases are not renewed. Of course, there are such cases, but they are rare. Since the size of an arbor garden is from about 2/16 to 3/16 of an acre, say 2 or 3 New York City lots, those forming a colony make a considerable community, in which the authority of the committee or board of trustees is absolute, and the few cases they have had to adjudicate have generally been caused by nagging women. It is claimed in the press that these colonists are literally without scandals, and that the life led by young and old is a most peaceful and happy one. People who are hard at work are not likely to be quarrelsome. Good wholesome food, much exercise in play and labor, and an abundance of fresh air and sunshine are conducive to happiness, especially as the clothing may be of a primitive kind or need not conform to the dictates of fashion. A teacher remarked, "It is noticeable that since these school children are engaged in lucrative work which does not go beyond their strength, and since they see with their own eyes the results of their labor, a sense of responsibility is engendered which has a beneficial influence upon school work also. Respect for all kinds of labor and a decrease in the destructiveness so often found among boys are unmistakable effects of the arbor gardens. It is not easy work which the children perform, for spade and rake require muscular effort, but it is ennobling work, for it leads to self-respect, self-dependence, and respect for others, as well as willingness to aid others. The most beautiful sight is afforded when on a certain date agreed on by the members of a colony, a harvest festival is held. Then flag raisings and illuminations and singing and music make the day a memorable one." Most of the families had not the means to buy the lumber and hardware to erect an arbor, and yet they were the very ones to whom the life in the open would be of the greatest benefit. Hence philanthropy erected the structures. The Patriotic Woman's League of the Red Cross built half of all the arbors of the colony found on the Jungfernheide. Many colonies reached into the woods, and naturally are of a different character from those in the open, for their tents are used instead of wooden structures. For protection during the night, watchmen pace up and down the lanes. This before the war entailed a cost of 7 1/2 cents a month to each family. The season lasts from May 1st to October 1st. The school-going population, meanwhile, attend their schools, which used to be reached by means of the elevated cars or surface tramways, for 2 1/2 cents, and much cheaper if they have commuters' tickets. Many schools are near enough to be reached on foot. The children do not loiter on the way, but when school is out they hurry home to begin work in the garden, or to sit down to a meal on the veranda, which is relished far more than a meal in a city tenement house filled with fetid air and wanting in light. Nearly every one of these gardens has a flagpole, and at night a Japanese paper lantern with a tallow dip in it illuminates the veranda. These, with flags by day, make a festive appearance. The teachers find that city dwellers who spend the 5 months in the open air are well equipped with elementary ideas in physical geography and astronomy. Their mental equipment is better, indeed, in all fields of thought. Their physical health is improved, as well as their ethical motives and conduct. To realize the full extent of these wholesale efforts, for put children into close contact with nature and they will improve in all directions. It is well to take a ride on the North Belt Line, elevated steam railroad the trains of which start from the Friedrich Street depot and bring one back after a ride of an hour and a half. Then one may do the same on the South Belt line. On these two trips one will see, not hundreds, but tens of thousands of such arbor gardens, full of happy women and children at work or play. The men come out on the Belt line when their work in town is done. The writer was riding through the city on an open cab and seeing hardly any children on the streets, and in the parks, he asked, "How is it that we see no children out?" "Ah, sir," was the reply, "if you will see the children of Berlin, you must go out to the arbor colonies outside of the city. There is where our children are." Subsequent visits to these colony gardens show that Berlin is by no means a childless city. To judge from the multitudinous arbors to be seen from the windows of the Belt Line, there must be 50,000 to 75,000 of them. As far as the eye reaches, the flagpoles, the orderly fences, and the little structures can be seen, and since the city has 2,000,000 inhabitants, it is very likely that an estimate made by a city official of several hundred thousands of children thus living in the open air is not excessive. The most beautiful and best arranged gardens are not found in the vicinity of railroads, but several miles out toward the north and the south of the city. Here, where the soil is better, fine crops are raised. If we turn our eyes homeward and contemplate the many thousands of small efforts made in this country toward the alleviation of city children's misery, we can say truthfully that we in America are perhaps fully alive to the necessity which has prompted the people of Berlin to action. We only need to be reminded of Mayor Pingree's potato patches on empty city lots, our children's outing camps, our occasional children's excursions, and the like. Still, there is nothing in this country to compare with the thousands of Berlin arbor gardens and their singularly convincing force. Like a circus, all this is supposed to be for the children, though it usually seems to need about 2 grown people to escort each child. The elders enjoy the gardens even more than the circus. The arbor gardens of Berlin should not be mistaken for the numerous forest schools, Waldschulen, in Germany. These schools in the woods are for sickly children, both physically crippled and mentally weak. The pupils have their lessons in the open, and the teachers live, play, and work with them. Long recesses separate the various lessons, and a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day out in the open is on the timetable of every one of these schools. These special open-air schools for weaklings and defectives are now found in many parts of Germany, notably in Charlottenburg, Strasbourg, and the industrial regions of the Rhineland. The example of Berlin has been followed in other German cities, such as Munich, notably in Dusseldorf on the Rhine, where the arbor gardens are called Schreber Gardens in honor of the man who promoted their establishment. There is a large colony of such gardens along the Hans Sachs Street, where lima beans, peas, lettuce, cucumbers, potatoes, and many other garden vegetables are raised. Even strawberries, raspberries, and fruit trees are found here. But the city being more lavishly provided with parks and open spaces than others of its size, the necessity for open air life has not made itself felt as forcibly as in Berlin. And think of the cleansing influence of all this. Light and air and labor, these are the medicines not of the body only, but of the soul. It is not ponderable things alone that we find in gardens, but the great wonder of life, the peace of nature, the influences of sunsets and seasons, and of all the intangible things to which we can give no name, not because they are small, but because they are outside the compass of our speech. The God that dwells in gardens is sufficient for all our needs, let the theologians say what they will. Not God in gardens? When the eve is cool? Nay, but I have a sign, 'tis very sure, God walks in mine. End of chapter 28. End of 3 Acres and Liberty by Bolton Hall.